Howdy everyone, I'm back.
Yeah, I'm back!
Anyway, homosexuality was invented by Big Purple to sell more purple flag colouring. If you've been online recently and you have any feeling towards transgender people other than outright hostility, you'll have probably heard the words basic biology. They'll be burned into your mind, like your slightly larger than average forehead, which means you're secretly a man now and didn't realise it. Or maybe you're a high-waisted man with feminine hips and therefore you are secretly born female? I don't know, something like that. Basic biology is one of these turns of phrase that internet weirdos have been using as a rallying cry for close to a decade. Here, click on this playlist where I talk about some of those. To understand what basic biology means, we have to dive deeper into how people use it. Because we could just look up what the individual words mean or something, but that wouldn't really get into the gravitas of the phrase and what its rhetorical function is. To risk sounding like a massive nerd about language, all I mean is, when you say something, you usually have some assumptions you're making when you say it. For example, if I say even, "The sky is blue," perhaps one of the most agreeable statements in the world, I've assumed a few things. For example, I've assumed that the sky is a real thing. I've assumed that it is one tangible thing, or at least I'm talking about it as though it is, and that it's a thing with a colour. Also, I've made the assumption that when you look at the sky, it's one of the colours that you would label as blue. But also, beyond the words that I'm saying, it also matters how I'm using them. I'm saying it like it's a fact, by saying it assertively and confidently. I could have said it like, "The sky is blue," and that would be completely different, even though I'm saying the same words. I'm also using it as an example of a statement that we all accept is obviously true, no matter whether or not there are plenty of cases in which maybe it isn't. For example, I'm recording this at like 3:30 AM where I am, and the sky is very dark and cloudy. If anything, it's a very dark grey right now rather than blue, so when I say the sky is blue as though it's true, I'm actually lying to you. But let's assume that I am telling you this in the middle of the day, where there's no clouds in the sky. Now, the sky is only blue because the air molecules diffract the light from the sun in a specific way, and the blue wavelengths get absorbed less by the sky, so they make it into your eyes easier. Upon learning this fact, it would make sense to treat the sky as the air between us and space. So you go out, you get a jar of air from outside, take it inside, look at it in a different room, and it's see-through. And then you find out air only appears blue at first glance because of the existence of the sun and the fact that there's a lot of air between it and us. And yet, if we backtrack to the start when I said the sky is blue, the assumption is not only that it's true, but also that it's an obvious truth, because you usually look up to the sky in the daytime because you're awake, and when you do that, you tend to see a lot of blue. And I know that, and I'm expecting you to know that. That's why I'm using it as an example. We got that? All of this to say, when I'm saying the sky is blue, it's not me trying to give you new information that you might not know. Instead, I'm using it as a rhetorical tool. More specifically, I'm using it as a starting point to explain a point that I'm trying to make. The information, "the sky is blue," is different to "the sky is blue," the sentence. Because while I say it as though it's something that's obviously true to your experiences as a person, when you start to look deeper, reality is actually a bit more complicated than that. And that's what I mean when I'm saying the sky is blue. When people say it's basic biology, it's pretty much always following the phrase two genders, or two sexes, that people learn about. It's somebody saying that there's XX and XY chromosome pairings and that's it. You're either an innie or an outie, and there's no middle ground between the two. Because for a lot of people, that tracks to how they live their lives. They've only met people with one or the other, so they assume they have one or the other, and that's just how it is. And I could just go into why that position is incorrect according to science. For example, first off, there are usually 44 more chromosomes. Humans contain multitudes, and 2 chromosomes don't decide everything about you. Intersex people with different chromosomal makeups exist and make up around as much of the population as natural blonde people do. Trans people who go through HRT and gender-affirming surgery have a much different biological makeup than the people of the sex they were assigned at birth. I say sex assigned at birth rather than sex they were born as because, we'll get to that. And it much more closely aligns with that of the sex they transition to. Hormones affect so much of your biology, regardless of whether they're natural or artificial. You are what you eat, you are what hormones you have in your body. Human sex is not really categorized by chromosomal makeup more than it's categorized by carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. The sex chromosomes only sort of tell you the instructions on how to create a cell, and that's only the first step of how to make a person. Chromosomes decay and wither at the ends as you get older and older. We go against our biology all the time. It's why we live so long. It's why we've eradicated diseases. It's why we've invented planes and cars and computers that do math and science for us. We're evolving faster than our biology can keep up. A lot of us take medicine that does what our chromosomes don't. Wear clothes to protect what our biology doesn't. We go through intense brain changes from when you're a child to when you're an adult, which is largely affected and literally shaped by the environment you grow up in. When our vision goes south, we wear glasses or get treatments to change whether we can see or not against our biology. We dye our hair to be different colors and tattoo our skin differently to what our biology allows as a means of self-expression. People with diabetes have to inject insulin into their bodies to produce chemicals that their biology doesn't tell them to make. People with mobility disorders use mobility aids like walking sticks and wheelchairs to allow them to do what their biology otherwise prevents them from doing. Science goes much further than what you learn in a 5th grade biology class, and it's a lot more complicated than a 2-word thesis statement. But the people who use the term basic biology don't really care about all that. Not really, they just think that trans people are a bit icky and that deferring to basic biology makes them seem smarter and it makes their bigotry justified. And I could leave it there if I really wanted. I debunked their claims and provided examples to back up what I claim. I said what I want to say to the people that will listen, and maybe some of you will even think I did a good job. But remember when we talked about the large amount of assumptions made with saying even simple things? There are a few key assumptions that come with this argument about what it's saying beyond the words being said, that a lot of people trying to debunk basic biology as an argument tend to gloss over or fail to grasp fully, and I kind of want to get at those. There are 4 of these that I want to discuss. The first of these assumptions these folks make is that you, dear viewer, are a fundamentally uncritical person who will see some weird rhetorical flourish that sweeps the real argument under the rug, and clap your hands like a seal with zero self-respect. 3 guesses why they make that assumption. Now this means that being aware of any of these assumptions means you've done more introspection than these people have ever done in their lives, so if you're listening and paying attention, then congratulations. The second assumption is that since this notion that sex is binary is supposedly sorted by science, and yes, see above, it's also impossible to argue with basic biology, because that's the thing that is immutable, objective, and anyone who disagrees is supposedly denying reality. Oh, and by the way, they say basic biology like they're talking about Newtonian physics or something, and they're only really correct insofar as it's only really a dull approximation of the truth that breaks down in some very crucial situations. I write some of these one-liners just for me, you don't have to find it funny. But when they say basic biology, they insist instead that it's one of the building blocks of the foundations of the universe we live in, as opposed to what it actually means, which is simplified so that even children can understand it. The third assumption rests on the idea that biology is unchangeable, which means that transgender people, or anyone who believes in what they call gender ideology, people who either do change their biology or support those who do, deserve to be put into that machine which makes horses into glue, which is a major hop, skip and jump from one assumption to another and is buried in many levels of weird religious fundamentalism, but it's an assumption these people make and I guess we have to talk about it now. And the fourth and final one is that sex and gender are the same thing. Sort of. That's not quite the assumption, but it does need you to conflate the two regularly. It's kind of a bait and switch, you see. We'll kind of get into that. But it's more that what matters is a person's sex and not their gender, and people's attraction is entirely dependent on physical characteristics, which is false. People get attracted to characters with no physical characteristics at all. People get attracted to anime characters and shit. Like, that's non-biological if you ask me. So that's basically what people think when they say 2 genders, basic biology. Sex is binary exclusively and cannot be changed. That argument is impossible to refute because it's a fundamental building block of biology, and to do so is to actively destroy the fundamental nature of the world and of biology itself, which is all that matters with respects to who and what you are. And apparently you're dim enough and they're important enough that you'll believe what they say uncritically. Basically, they're eugenicists. Now, being aware of these assumptions is at least a good first step to not be fooled by these arguments. Like I said, just by knowing about them and understanding them, you've done more critical thinking than these people have done in their lives. But the hardest part is breaking down these assumptions, which is especially hard because A, they try to make them really fucking hard to find, and B, similar assumptions are in basically everything we have said and ever will say. And that's not me saying all that those assumptions are bad necessarily, but that being aware of them is a good skill to have so that you can say the things you mean in a more effective way. Sometimes well-meaning allies will also say in response that sex and gender are actually two different things whenever one of these bozos conflates the two. Usually it's followed by saying something like, transgender people are changing their gender even though they're staying the same sex. The ally then struggles with their words as the bozo starts talking about biological sex instead and gets rings run around them in the marketplace of ideas. And while I feel to an extent for the ally that got humiliated, it's always important to think of the ramifications of what you're actually saying. Because sure, the ally may think that saying transgender people change their gender and not their sex says you should respect trans people's gender because that's what can be changed, but it really just implies that trans people are still their assigned sex at birth, which isn't really true. Judging by hormone levels, I'm more of a woman than Margaret Thatcher is today. Extrapolate across a community of clueless allies, and you get TERFs, the most prominent brand of astroturf transphobia, whose whole shtick is that they're pretending to fight for women's sex-based rights. This video isn't about them though, it's about basic biology. One of the ways to look at the functions the phrase basic biology plays is as a thought-terminating cliche. This is something like my body, my choice in relation to abortion, or it's the food chain in relation to eating meat. And thought-terminating cliches are value-neutral. They can be good and they can be bad, but people only really say them when they intend on having the last word on a topic. It's meant to mean, I have won this argument, I'm closing the door to this discussion behind me, because I am done here. And they generally picture themselves saying it accompanied with a mic drop and they're just walking away from an explosion. And they don't want to look back because cool guys don't look at explosions. And anything you say to try and pull their attention your way again, even when they're wrong, is you just trying to grind the mincemeat too fine for the pie. And it sucks, it's not great. I'd much rather have people be willing to change their minds personally when they're exposed to, like, truth and stuff. But not everyone's going to be convinced that they're wrong, because they're too proud to change, too terrified of not knowing the right answer, and too insecure to not understand it. And that's okay in a vacuum. Like, why else do you think I have a YouTube channel? What I want to do instead is provide a similar level of biology that's actually more accurate to the truth, sort of like Einstein's expansions upon Newtonian physics in a way. That's what I was referencing before, by the way, with the joke about how Newtonian physics are a dull approximation of scientific consensus that's simplified to teach school kids basic science principles. Here goes. The human body comes in many shapes and sizes, and chromosomes tell you how to make another one if you need to, but they go wrong a lot of the time by not producing the right chemicals, so sometimes people do other things to make it better at the things it needs to do to keep you alive. We usually call these things medicine, and they can be anything from SSRIs to insulin injections to paracetamol. One reason we do this is gender dysphoria. Some people's sex chromosomes are a little bit different to the ones that match their identity and would make them able to exist in the world without wanting to, die. And since we ideally value people's brains more than the meat sacks that surround them, we allow them to get sex changes if they want one. A transgender person will typically change their gender, sex, or both. A sex change includes HRT, which runs the appropriate hormones through the body manually rather than automatically using an internal organ, and surgeries which remove or change parts of the body that would otherwise make them appear as the wrong sex. These procedures are overwhelmingly helpful and have a lower regret rate than taking paracetamol does. Now, sex is a different thing to gender, although the two of them overlap quite a bit in certain ways. Gender is interpreted by all of the social cues and what we see in a person that demonstrate their role in society. These are unique to everyone and change quite a bit across cultures, but they tend to mean somewhat similar things to a large proportion of people. Blue for boy, pink for girl. But crucially, people are also assigned sex on birth based on these visual stimuli. Usually it's just the genitalia the baby has. Further examinations aren't typically done unless the baby is identified as intersex, in which case they typically end up having surgery enacted upon them until they appear to match one of the two accepted sexes. This is a barbaric process and should promptly be discontinued as soon as possible. This is one of the main reasons it's more accurate to say someone's sex is assigned at birth rather than what they were born as. Any further questions should be written to this address on a postcard. I hope this is a good explanation in a minute and 47 seconds? Anyway, thanks for watching. So like there's more that I didn't cover, I might make a follow-up video that's about those things, but if you managed to reach this far into the video, I hope you enjoyed. YouTube actually lets me know which videos people subscribe from. The most I've ever got in a video was 361 from this one, but if this video beats that one, I'll make another one where I pretend to be a D-trans woman on Twitter and let you know how it goes. Anyway, stay safe, stay spicy, and have a good